Functions are the building blocks of a structured and reusable code base. In today's episode, we'll explore why and how you can define your own functions, followed by a few interactive code examples along the way. Welcome back, guys, to another episode of PyPod Chronicles, Python, and Sound Bites. Wait, no, this isn't that. This is Code with Josh. What is this? Wait, I do have a podcast. This is Code with Josh. And my podcast is actually called PyPod Chronicles. And it's currently on episode 21, and it's actually already on Apple Music, Spotify, and my Substack. But I'm actually releasing it here on my YouTube channel as well. So head over to the channel under the podcast link. I'll try and link it here if I can, and check it out, right? I'm trying to give learning a variety of tools. So you have the channel, you have my courses, you have the newsletter, but now you have the podcast. Use what you use to learn best. That's why I've made that. Welcome back, guys, to another episode of, you guessed it, not PyPod Chronicles, but Code with Josh. That's me. In today's episode, we are going to break down how you can define your own functions and return and reuse the value of your functions. Before I jump into today's episode, guys, the first link in the description is a free handcrafted guide that I've made for you guys, for my Python students, that has everything you need to get started all in one place. It's easy to read, easy to use, and you can keep it on your computer. What's not to love? All right, help out the channel and hit that subscribe button. All right, jumping into today's episode. Functions are a way to create code and reuse it throughout your project. So like a function is like a block, a building block, and anywhere you need to use this block, you can take it and use it without having to rebuild that block of code. These are your functions, and that's the purpose of really getting into programming. This is week 3 of your programming journey in Python. In the first week, you were introduced to all the basics, variables, basic Python functions. Last week was all about loops. Now let's take what you've learned and let's put all that in a function. Let's put all that in a reusable block you can use in other places of your code. Let's take a look at what I mean. Let's start off with some of the functions you already know. And which of these have you been using? Have you been using others? Well, these are functions. You already know some of them and you've been using them, right? A function is a special word followed by a set of parentheses. That's basically a reusable block of code. But these functions were programmed by someone else. We want to be able to create our own function just like this that I can use just like these wherever I want to. Now, as I've been saying, right, just remember it's a reusable block of code. It does have its own unique name. We cannot use any other Python word for the name of the function, right? So a function I make, I cannot call it print or input. Those are already Python functions, a unique name. It can be called anywhere in your code. Now, when we as developers say call, we just mean we want to use the function, just like you would with print. Right? You type print, parentheses, you print something out. Here you can see that I am defining a function. This is how we literally create a function of your own. Python has the keyword def or def. This means to obviously define your function, def. Then we give the name of the function. Here I've named the function test function with a set of parentheses. Just like any function, a function is followed by a set of parentheses. Inside the parentheses, we put parameters, which I'll talk about here in a moment. Anything with inside your function definition, this code is going to run when we use the function. So, up top, we defined a function. Now, some other place in your code, this could be 10 lines later, or this could be 100 lines later. We are going to call our function. To call the function, we just type the name that you gave the function with parentheses. That's it. It's just like the functions you already know. We use it the same way. But now we want to define a function for you. Inside the parentheses, we put any arguments we may need. Now, these are 2 new words that I've said, parameter and argument. We want to talk about these. Let me show you this broken down for you even more. Now, a parameter is literally like a local variable. You're creating a variable that doesn't doesn't have a value yet, and you're going to use this variable inside your function. Right? So if I have a variable called parameter 1, in the function I could make a condition and say, if parameter 1 equals 5, do something. Parameter 1 doesn't have a value, but it will. Then when we call our function, I give it arguments. Arguments is the live data that you give when you call the function. This live data will be used as the value to your parameters. Right? If you make a function that has 2 parameters, you must give it 2 arguments. A function does not need parameters either, but if you want to interact with data or give it something to check or use, it's going to need parameters. Next up, I have put together a code example for you. Now we're going to look at a new Python word. This word is called return. Return is going to allow you to return something. We use return with functions. Let me show you what this is. So on the left of the screen is the function. Let's say we define this at the top of our code, right? Just for readability, I've put them side by side. So I define a function called goodDeal. GoodDeal takes a variable, a parameter, and I've named this parameter cost. You can name your parameters anything you want. Inside the function, I have a condition. I'm checking if that parameter value is greater than 50 and less than 150. I create a variable. My variable is called res, right? This is just a variable that I've created right here in the function. Res is short for response in programming. So I'm getting back a response. I could have called it response, but it just takes some space on the screen. So I called it res, right? The value of res is this is a good deal. If the cost is over 150, the value of my variable is overpriced. Anything else, my variable value res is cheap, buy now. When my condition is done running, I am going to return my variable. I'm going to give back whatever value the variable res has. This value I can use on the outside of the function as a value to another variable. Okay, so think about that. Pause if you need to. So outside my function, I just have normal code. I start with a variable cost. This is going to be an input, so I'm going to enter a number here. Then I create a variable called response. The value of response is actually me calling my function, and the argument I'm giving it is whatever I enter into the input. Then I'm going to print the string advice plus response. So the value to my response variable is whatever my function returns. If my function returns overpriced, it's going to print off, you guessed it, print advice overpriced. Right? So response is holding one of these values from our function. And I can use the response variable like any other variable. If response was overpriced, I'm going to print additionally, you don't need this item. That's pretty cool. I can use what I get back from a function as the value to a variable and then use that variable in other parts of my code. Let me break it down a final step before we jump into some coding. Guys, quick disclaimer, I'm actually going pretty quick in this episode, and it's hard because I'm trying to keep these short, but I can't do it so well. Now, I'm only scratching the surface here, and I'm going kind of fast, I get that. If you're looking for me to slow down, more advanced concepts to actually master and grasp these fundamentals on maybe a level that you're more familiar with or at your pace, 1, rewatch the video, or 2, I have full-fledged courses out about this, taking you from zero to knowing. And it's my Python course for absolute beginners here in 2023. Over 12 and a half hours of content. It's the link in the description. It's like the second link. Head on down there and check it out. You build interactive games and programs along the way, and this is jam-packed with content to help you grow as a Python developer. All right, back to whatever this video part was. If you want to pause the screen, up to you, right? Whatever we get back, I love my color coordination. I love my color coordination. So pause the video here, okay? I'm gonna head over into VS Code because that is where we're gonna start coding your own functions. Let's define a function to check for the number of occurrences in a word, like a certain letter in a word. How many parameters are we gonna need for this? Well, I'm gonna need 2 parameters. I'm gonna need a word or a string, and then I'm gonna need a certain character that I wanna check for. So let's define our function. I'm gonna call it char checker. And this is gonna take a string, right? And then it's also gonna take a character. What do I wanna check for specifically? Inside my function body, I'm gonna create a variable called count. If I find the letter I'm looking for in the word, then I'm gonna increase this counter by 1. Great. Now let's use the loop that we learned in the last week's episode. Let's say for every letter in my string. If the letter that I'm currently on is equal to the character that I'm looking for, then let's take our count variable and let's increase it by 1. When our function is done, let's return how many times it was in the loop. All right, pretty cool. So now I can check for a certain letter. Let's call our function and use it. Outside of my function now, let's give a basic example. So I'll just say basic. I don't know why. That's it. I'll say, hello there, everyone watching. Okay, that is my string. Let's go down here and let's say, what character am I looking for? So I'm gonna say, I have E a lot. I'll look for E. Now I can call my function. I'll create a variable called result. And this is going to be equal to me calling my function, and I need to give my function 2 arguments. The first one is my string, which is basic. Then I'm going to give it a letter. That's my letter. Cool. Let me come down here. I'm going to print off now. I have result. I'm just going to say the letter, and then I'm going to put result. Let's run our code. Great, there you go, the letter 6. Well, okay, 6 isn't a letter, but the letter E occurred 6 times. Let's create a function that's going to check through a list of countries. And basically, if a country's name is, let's say, less than 5 letters, well, we want to know about that. So here I'm going to define a function. Let's call it country length, I guess. And this can basically take a list of countries. So I'll say country list, and we will say min num. So the minimum length of the word. It'll take a number. I'll create a variable, counter. I like the word count for our variables, right? I used it in the last example. And I can say for every country in my country list, if the length of the current country is, let's say, greater than the minimum number that I am looking for, then I'm going to increase my counter by 1, because that has more than 5 letters, or however many we say, essentially. Finally, when we're done, we can return. What do I want to return? Well, I could return count again, right? Just like last time. You could return a number, you could return anything. Whatever you get back, well, that's what you want to use on the outside. So then here, I could just create a list of countries. I'll say country equals list. Then I need my min num. Let's just say 5. So the USA has less than 5 numbers. That's not going to be included in this. All right. Now I'll create a variable called result res. Whatever you want to name it is fine. I'm going to call my function country length. I will give it my list. And then I'm going to give it my min num right there that we've created. And then finally on the outside I could just print off something. So I'm going to print off how many countries have that. So I can just be like the number of countries. Ideally I should get back 3 when we run this. There we go. The number of countries, 3, because there are 3 countries in my list that are longer than 5, right? So we gave our functions. You created your functions. We made parameters, which is like a local variable, and then you gave it arguments along the way. That is pretty amazing. All right, guys, let's head back. I already have the code put together for you guys here, but I just want to show you that you can actually call a function within another function. Here I've defined 2 functions. One is called calc average. This is just going to calculate the average of something I give it, a list. And then my other function is going to calculate the student average. So it's actually going to call. It's using the first function we defined there, right? The only function that my program is actually calling is the calc student average. I'm giving it a name. I'm giving it a list, right? So then inside here, I'm actually student average scores. Scores is the list that I'm giving it. That is being passed into our other function, which is returning our average. When I run this, one function calls the other and it gives us back that value. Great, there we go. Jane's average score is 86.6, right? That is how I can use and build out multiple functions and have like one main function. This will be an important concept later on. Great, we're back here now at the finale, all right? I took you through the material that I created for you guys and I tried to implement that in creating functions for us in VS Code, showing you how you can define and create your own functions which have parameters and you can return a value to use as the value to a variable outside of that function. Well, this is what I want us to be working on here in the third week of mastering the fundamentals. Inside your function, you can put code that you already know that you've been using from the first 2 weeks now to make reusable blocks of code for lengthier programs. Guys, remember, if you're new here, hit the like button. That helps me, and smash the subscribe button, as I am a growing YouTube channel and I want to reach more students around the world. If you're looking for a free handcrafted guide that I've made for you, it's the first link in the description, and it actually has a little bit in there about functions to help you as a cheat sheet whenever you get stuck along the way. Well, until next time, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Code with Josh. I'll see you in our next episode.